The Senate will come to order. Please stand for the prayer. Today's chaplain is our Senate chaplain, Pastor Mike Smith from Redeeming Love Church in Maplewood. And following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon, Senators. It's not only in these moments that I pray for you, but I have been praying for you quite a bit lately. But this is the prayer. Heavenly Father, it seems that every time we meet in this room, we come to you with three common requests. We ask, first of all, for wisdom. And we ask for guidance. And we ask you to bless Minnesota. And we pray these prayers because we are dependent upon you continually and daily. Lord, we know that wind will bring change. So God, we pray, I pray for a fresh wind of hope and honor and humility to blow through our lives today. I pray for the wind of hope to replace hopelessness and despair, that we could see beyond the moment and see and always be reminded of our mission and our purpose. And I pray for that wind of honor, replacing any disrespect and dishonor in our heart. And may we be filled with dignity and respect for one another, to see the value that you see in each other, in times, especially in times of pressure. And we pray for the wind of humility to replace our own pride and our own unwillingness that we all experience, unwillingness to change. That we would learn how to submit to one another, that we would see also our total reliance on you. 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter says, love is patient, it's kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. It doesn't traffic in shame and disrespect, nor selfishly seek its own honor. But love does not be filled with anger. It's not easily irritated or quick to take offense. So, Lord, my question today is this: is there a place for love in government? And I believe the resounding answer is yes, because love always protects, always trusts, and perseveres. And when we humble ourselves and pray, we will experience unity and hope and release honor. And I believe that the headlines of our nation will be rewritten concerning Minnesota, that this state will be called a place of healing and hope for a new tomorrow. And I decree that it will be contagious. Amen.
Secretary will take the roll.
Senators Abler, Anderson, Bach, Benson, Bigham, Carlson, Chamberlain, Champion, Clausen, Coleman, Swedzinski, Dahms, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Duckworth, Dietzick, Eaton, Eichhorn, Eakin, Fate, Franzen, Friends, Gazelka, Goggin, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Ingebrigtsen, Isaacson, Jasinski, Johnson, Johnson, Stewart, Kent, Kiffmeyer, Klein, Coran, Kunish, Lang, Latz, Limmer, Marty, Matthews, McEwen, Miller, Murphy, Nelson, Newman, Newton, Osmic, Pappas, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rest, Rosen, Ruud, Senjum, Tomassoni, Torres, Ray, Utke, Weber, Westrom, Uyghur, Wickland.
Pursuant to Rule 14.1, the following members intend to vote under Rule 40.7. Senators Abler, Carlson, Champion, Coleman, Eakin, Fate, Goggin, Herr, Housley, Ingebrigtsen, Isaacson, Kiffmeyer, Klein, Latz, Limmer, Newton, Osmic, Rarick, Torsray, and Weber. A quorum is present. We will begin on the agenda today with the fifth order of business, reports of committees. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee report printed in the agenda be adopted.
Discussion on the Johnson motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Next, we'll move to the sixth order of business, second reading of Senate bills. The Secretary will read the Senate file number.
Senate file number 39.
Second reading. Next, we'll move to the 8th order of business, introduction and first reading of Senate files listed in today's introduction calendar, or Senate file numbers 41 through 45. These Senate files are given their first reading and referred as indicated. Next, we'll move to the 9th order of business, motions and resolutions. We have a few authors' motions listed in the agenda. We'll take these authors' motions as one motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate that the following bills be made for special orders for immediate consideration. You'll find those bills on your desk.
Members, the first bill up for consideration is number 1 on General Order, Senate File 21, but we're just going to give Senator Ruud a moment to make it to the Senate floor. She's on her way. We were a little too quick for her today. All right, members, the first bill up for consideration is number 1 on general orders. It is Senate File number 21. Senator Ruud, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate File 21 is the Legacy Amendment Bill. If you recall, the bill was passed out of this body 66-0. It was a wonderful bipartisan bill, and I want to thank you all for the wonderful position you put the Senate in to negotiate this bill this session. I'd also like to thank my staff, Matt Elfritz, Lisa Handrick, and of course the nonpartisan staff who did such a wonderful job, and Mr. Knopf, who is retiring this year. We will miss him greatly. This year the bill spends $645.6 million. With the extra funding next year of the Outdoor Heritage Fund, that will be a total of $784.6 million for the biennium that we spend on the legacy. The legacy is divided into 4 portions, and the first I'll talk about is the Outdoor Heritage Fund. We spend $128 million this year on that. The Outdoor Heritage Fund left this body as the Outdoor Heritage Council recommended it, and it returns to this body in the same way. All of the recommendations are intact and in this bill. The second portion is the Clean Water Fund. $256 million are spent on this portion. We funded the Soil and Water Conservation Districts to $24 million. As you recall, this is the 3rd biennium that we have done this. This is a solid and stable source of funding for the Soil and Water Conservation Districts. We have solved a problem that has been ongoing on how to fund them. This works, and so I think that we should, we've proven that it works, and it should remain. We also spend $5.6 million for CREP. As it left this body, it was $15 million, so we have $10 million left that we're hoping to see in the bonding bill to complete our commitment for the CREP dollars in the federal government. It includes $15.9 million for PFA, and one provision that we accepted that was not in this is $1.3 million for chronic wasting disease in water for the U of M. As many of you know, we have a crisis in chronic wasting disease in Beltrami County right now. It has quarantined 10 deer farms. It's quite catastrophic up there, and so we were able to react to that and get this funding to the U of M for this study. The Clean Water Fund also, except for those few provisions, it has followed the Clean Water Council's recommendations. Parks and Trails is funded for $110 million. It is exactly as the Parks and Trails Commission has sent it to us and how it left this body. There are no additions or any extra policy in that provision. The Arts and Cultural Heritage is funded at $149 million. It also adheres to the Constitution, the 47% to the Arts and to the State Arts Board. It follows almost identically how it left this body. We did accept some language for the Cultural Identity and Heritage Grant programs. The Senate language was well crafted and well wordsmithed, and we feel that it was an exceptional piece to this provision. However, the House wanted some comfort language, and so we worked very hard with them to give them that language that they needed to approve this bill. And we think you can see the language there, and we think it helps the bill in clarification. There is a few House-only provisions that we accepted in negotiation. In this section, that would be the Litchfield Opera House, the Armour and Company Gatehouse, the Minnesota Center for the Book, and Appetite for Change. Other than that, there are a few monetary changes, but it is basically the bill that left this body and was passed unanimously. And with that, Mr. President, I'll stand for questions.
Discussion on Senate File 21. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President and members, and thank you, Senator Ruud, for this bill. I think I was one of the 66 votes for it on the way out, and I thank you for your work in conference committee or working group or whatever, however we're referring to our process in the interim, and I fully expect that I will be supporting the bill today. Members, of course, this represents a tremendous amount of effort that we're doing on behalf of the people of Minnesota who entrusted us with these resources when they voted for the constitutional amendment in 2008, and that was really a historic opportunity. And I now, as of a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, serve on the Lessard-Sams Commission, so I'm excited to help have a role in crafting the package that we're going to see in front of us next year. So much work gets done on parks and trails and preserving our land and water resources, as well as our cultural and arts legacy, which is really a standout and exemplar for the rest of the country. But members, the Constitution does say quite clearly, and I'll just read the verbatim, the words from the Constitution, the dedicated money under this section must supplement traditional sources of funding for these purposes and may not be used as a substitute. And that's what the Minnesota voters voted for in 2008. And I think I've raised this before, Senator Ruud, and have called attention to my concern that, again, there are appropriations from the Clean Water Fund that violate our Constitution, the plain reading and language of our Constitution. And I know it's been done before. We've done this now a few cycles in a row as we've sought to use these monies to fund the Soil and Water Conservation District work, important work that's done all across the state at the local level to help with our soil conservation efforts, our water quality efforts, and the like, as well as within the RIM program, the easements that we purchase for CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which we've traditionally funded through the bonding bill, the Soil and Water Conservation District work was identified as important work that we needed to undertake with more energy and greater resources, and to do so with the explicit commitment that we do so out of the general fund. And in fact, when we first started on this kind of new era of really increasing the level of work of the SWDCDs, we did so through the general fund. Members, what happens when we simply look to the Clean Water Fund as a source for this is we're simply addressing budget pressures and budget problems, and we're not doing anything new and in complement to the important work represented by those important initiatives. The Clean Water Fund, of course, would be a tremendous complement in the form of innovations, pilots, research, but those opportunities are lost when we just simply treat this fund as a general fund pressure relief valve. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to offer the A1 amendment.
Senator Dibble offers the A1 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Dibble moves to amend Senate File Number 21 as follows, page 115 after line 13 insert. This is the A1 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, and I'd like to request a roll call, Mr. Chair.
Roll call will be granted. Senator Dibble.
So, Mr. Chair, this is simply something that we've done in the past to remedy this error that we've made. It doesn't undo what Senator Ruud seeks to do in the bill, but it simply says that should a surplus occur in the general fund at some point in the future, we will replenish and repay the Clean Water Fund. And it places it sixth in a list of priorities of a call on those surplus funds. And so should we run into the good fortune of a forecasted budget surplus, it would repay the funds that we're spending out of the Clean Water Fund for those CREP easements, as well as for the Soil and Water Conservation District operation and programming. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion on the A1 amendment. Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Dibble, for bringing this forward. I think what this amendment does, and I know we did it the first year of the biennium when we decided to use the clean water funds for the soil and water conservation districts, because I think we felt we were unclear and in uncharted waters. But as this is the third, we did not do this in the last biennium because we found we were on solid ground using the soil and water conservation district money out of the Clean Water Fund. It is not unconstitutional. You may disagree with its use, but it's not unconstitutional. I think by adding this amendment on, we are saying that we are misusing the money, and that because we misused it, we have to pay it back. So I think it sends the wrong message. We have solved the problem. It works well, and I don't think that this is necessary at all. And so I would oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just rise in support of this amendment, and thank you, Senator Dibble, for bringing this amendment. You know, one of the first meetings that I had as a new senator was with scientists and with people who depend on the funding for the soil and water conservation districts, and they explained to me this problem and their deep concern that the funds in the Clean Water Fund unfortunately have been going to basic funding for the soil and water conservation districts, when in fact they're not meant to supplant funding for those districts. They're meant to be in addition and supplemental funding. And they need that supplemental funding to do very, very important work on water quality, helping farmers to do better by water quality, helping all regions across the state. So this funding is very, very important that it's very important, as I understand it, that it be seen and used as supplemental, as it is stated in the Constitution. And I fully support this amendment, and I look forward to working on this in the future. But the soil and water conservation districts are doing critically important work for clean water in Minnesota. This funding should be supplemental. Thank you.
The Secretary will take the roll on the A1 amendment. All members in alternate locations, please come to the chamber to vote. I'll call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Fateh votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Herr votes aye.
Herr votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Klein votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes aye.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Chamberlain votes no.
Chamberlain votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes no.
Coleman votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes no.
Goggin votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes no.
Ingebrigtsen votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmic votes no.
Osmic votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rarick votes no.
Rarick votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Weber votes no.
Weber votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Abler votes no.
Abler votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Limmer votes no.
Limmer votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes no.
Lang votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Gazelka votes no.
Gazelka votes no. Abler was in the chamber present to vote. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Kiffmeyer votes no.
Kiffmeyer votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Housley votes no.
Housley votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 30 ayes and 36 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Further discussion on Senate File 21. Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 21, a bill for an act relating to state government appropriating money from outdoor heritage.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to all the members in the chamber and also in my committee. I'd like to say thank you to Senator Herr, my minority lead, for always being available and for being a good partner. My committee members were all very helpful and instrumental in putting this bill together. So I appreciate your support on this bill. I think it's a bill that we can be very proud of. And in the next 10 years, when we go to renew this bill, I think we can say we're proud of how we spent the money. Thank you.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator McEwen.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And my esteemed colleague, Senator Fong He, was our DFL lead on the Legacy Committee, and he asked me to say a few words. He's not able to be with us in person today, so I wanted to just share his thanks for all of the excellent work that went into this bill. And the collaboration. I think we all appreciate certain provisions in this bill are very, very important, and it's really good to see that they made it through and that some of this critical cultural and environmental work is going to go forward. In particular, one of the things that Senator Herr wanted to make sure that we mentioned is our appreciation that there is an allocation for the Minnesota Humanities Center. And while there are a number of organizations that we hope will benefit from that allocation, including the Somali Museum of Minnesota, the Lao Assistance Center, Karen Community, the Singkang, Lao, Minnesota, excuse me if I mispronounced that, the Hmong Museum, the Hmong Cultural Center Museum, the DIAL Group, the Hmong SGU Veterans and Families of the United States, Comunidad Latinas Unidas and Servicio, Clues Appropriation, the Walk on Teepee Center, 30,000 feet for Black Arts Center, and the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. So while specific allocations were made to those groups, we do hope that those groups will be able to receive the funding that they need to do this very, very important cultural work for Minnesotans. As we know, our state is more diverse than it has ever been, and it is so important that all of us are able to have these this cultural education by these very important groups, bringing us together, educating us about the history of different people who are Minnesotans and their cultural heritage and the culture that they add to our community. So that diversity is just so important, and we thank those groups, and we're looking and hoping to see those allocations will end up benefiting those organizations. And thank you again, everyone, for the work on the bill.
Further discussion on the bill, Senator Bigham.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank Senator Ruud and Representative Hansen for their advocacy on the relocation funds for the armor gates in South St. Paul. The meatpacking industry in the history of meat processing is very big in South St. Paul. Go Packers, and at South St. Paul Packers. Just going to make that clear. And just really appreciate the preservation of the community's history, and I know they're grateful for it, and I appreciate that. I concur with what Senator McEwen also is mentioning about the humanities. You know, Senator Hoffman and I last month were able to attend a wonderful event celebrating the Lao New Year. And what has struck me about reading the bill and all the different cultures that apply for this funding is they really want to celebrate their culture and their heritage. And I think allowing a little bit more autonomy in how those funds are going to be spent is probably something we should look at in the future. So I just want to again thank everybody for their efforts on this bill. I think the funding for the clean water and other groups in here, the Science Museum and the zoos are very important to folks here in Minnesota and our culture. So again, I just want to say thanks.
Final discussion on the bill, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just rise to support this bill and to thank Senator Ruud for her careful watch care over these legacy funds and her entire committee. And, you know, there's just so many things here. It's just really hard to mention them all. And I do believe that they are worth mentioning. So allow me just to say a few of these items that have not been mentioned. The parks and trails are so important. And we saw how important they were, particularly during the time where so much was closed down in our state. The parks and trails were not. They are critical. And I appreciate Senator Ruud for particularly placing funds to increase Minnesotans' access to parks and trails. And we've been hearing a lot about soil health. And I appreciate there are a number of provisions in this legacy bill to help with soil health and to help our ag producers as they look to enriching that soil health. And then there are those great learning experiences for our kids that this legacy bill has continued to bring forward. The children's museums, the Science Museum was mentioned, the Minnesota Zoo, the Center for the Book, and let us not forget the regional libraries and how important those are all across our communities, all across this state. And the libraries are so much more members than when I was a youngster going to libraries to check out books. Our libraries provide so much more, and Senator Ruud, you did a nice job of making sure that legacy funds touch all of those areas that are so important to our quality of life in Minnesota. Not just the quality of our water and our rivers and our lakes, that is critically important, but also the quality of our life. And I just appreciate your great work in this area and look forward to casting a strong green vote in favor of this bill.
Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a feeling of guilt standing up after the author has given her final. So Senator Ruud, you may have to do another final, but I would be actually remiss. I've got a little town west of Rochester, which I represent, called Casson, and they have a city park like all communities, and way back in the 1930s, a WPA project, a sort of a victory wall, if you will, across the front of it. The park, it's limestone, and all these years later, of course, it's crumbled. And this community came to me some months ago, and Dave, you think we could get a little help with this wall? And so yeah, let's just put a bill in for the legacy fund, $30,000. And they said, by the way, if we can get $30,000, we'll go out and raise more than that. And they have, I think it's 43 already. So they're going to fix this wall up. But Senator Ruud, to that little community, who I don't think has certainly never gotten a bonding bill or anything like that, nothing special, this is their first ask ever, they're just tremendously thankful and elated about their $30,000 out of this bill. So I want to thank you for that, Senator Ruud, and know that the city of Casson is very, very grateful. Thank you.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Ruud.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I do want to make comment on the Community Identity and Heritage Grants Program. You know, we worked very, very hard on that. I want to thank Senator Champion. We had some very frank and candid conversations about how that language should look, what it should look like. We worked across the aisle to make sure that the Senate language was really strong, and it really included everyone. And so when it left this body, it was really an inclusive language. Legacy for all. The legacy is for all Minnesotans, and I want everyone to remember that. So we have added language onto this bill that identifies groups. And I want you all to know that every single one of those groups has gotten funding. There has never been a group, because of their race or their color or their diversity, that has not gotten funding in the Legacy Amendment. And so the outdoor heritage, you look at their records, it's stellar. You look at the Humanities Center, the History Center, you can see where those grants went. And the people that have applied, it is diverse, and it's wonderful, and we celebrate it. So I'm hoping in the legacy bills to come that we won't have to name groups by their race and their color and where they come from. We'll just say that all Minnesotans qualify for these funds, and that's what this bill does. And so I thank you all for the great candid conversations that we've had on this issue. And I thank you for this great bill that you all worked so hard for. And so with that, members, I ask for a green vote.
Senator Ruud.
Mr. President, I ask that Senate File 21 be laid on the table.
On the Ruud motion to lay Senate File number 21 on the table. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. The next bill up for consideration is number 4 on general orders, Senate File 18, Senator Tomassoni.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate File 18 is the higher education agreement that the working groups came up with. I'd like to just take a moment to thank my staff, Tricia Elite and Laura Bach and David Frazier, for the hard work and the contributions that they put into this bill. Without their help, it might not be as good a product. I also want to thank Joan White and Hannah Grunwald from the Nonpartisan Research, and I'd like to thank my conferees, Senators Rarick, Jasinski, Goggin, and Klassen. I'd also like to acknowledge Representative Bernardi and her contributions from the House, and all the hard work that her staff put in, and the cooperation we got from the Department of Higher Education and Commissioner Dennis Olson and his staff. So, members, with that, this bill is a $3.5 billion investment in higher education. It increases college affordability by providing stable funding for public institutions and making significant investments in direct student aid, reducing, or actually making college more affordable. Specifically, the bill provides a combined $89 million in operations and maintenance funding to our public higher education, and it's broken down at $45 million increase in O&M at Minnesota State and $38 million at the University of Minnesota. We cap tuition at a maximum of 3.5% each year. We increase grant awards for low and middle income families by $26 million by increasing the living expense allowance and decreasing the amount of middle class families are asked to pay. The bill increases funding to various scholarship programs by $11 million. It decreases textbook costs by requiring 4 more colleges to implement zero-cost textbook degrees. And members, Minnesota State just put out a press release on Z degrees and found that the programs that are already in place have saved $1.7 million for students. This bill also increases small campus aid by $5.4 million and to provide more direct and additional support for our smaller campuses in rural Minnesota. We have maintained the funding for the spinal cord research as well as for the regenerative medicine. We also address critical workforce shortages by increasing funding for the Workforce Development Scholarship Program and adding the ability for colleges to target funds to address local workforce shortages. Targets to help students struggling with mental health, small emergencies, and housing and food insecurity. It spends $2.5 million on mental health and basic needs programs. Expands the Hunger-Free Campus designation to all public, private, and tribal colleges in Minnesota, and creates a competitive grant to increase access to food for low-income college students struggling with food insecurity. It increases emergency grant aid to help students get through small emergencies without dropping out of college. And it requires Minnesota State to refund online tuition charges made to students for courses moved online due to the coronavirus pandemic. And finally, it creates a foster independence grant program. Members, I think we have a very good bill in front of us here. And I think the working group came up with a product we can all be proud of. And I solicit your support and ask you to vote green on this bill.
Discussion on Senate File 18. Senator Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to take a moment just to thank Senator Tomassoni and the colleagues that I served with on the Higher Education Committee for really putting together a good bill, and also the people in the House that worked on this. I think we came up with a really good bill this year. The things that I'm most proud of, I think, is if you look at some of the provisions, we have several good provisions to assist underserved students, students of color, and also low-income students to make higher education in Minnesota more affordable. Some of those examples you've already heard from Senator Tomassoni, but the child care grant awards, College Possible, the ICAP increases, hunger-free campuses, aspiring teachers of color scholarships, the grants to student teachers in shortage areas, underrepresented teacher grants. Those are all examples, I think, of really assisting students that really need the help in achieving a higher education degree. I also think the increases in the Minnesota grant program were just a good provision that we put in, decreasing the assigned family responsibility by 3 points, and in general we will be putting additional dollars into all student awards that are eligible for the program. I think, too, there were several provisions that are in the bill to protect students and the state of Minnesota when private higher education institutions close their doors. And I think when you put all of this together, we've worked really to put together a good bill. So thank you, Mr. President, and again, thank you to my colleagues who worked on this.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. I want to thank everybody who's worked on this proposal. It's strong, but call attention to language right at the start of the bill dealing with funding for campus sexual assault prevention, both in office and programming. A number of years ago, student leaders across the state of Minnesota on our college campuses began to advocate for funding to prevent campus sexual assault. And I am delighted to see that that plea for that funding to prevent sexual assault on our campuses is finally being realized in this piece of legislation. It's good news. And if they're listening, those student leaders from our college campuses who are now likely all graduated, I want to say thank you to them and to the people who had the wisdom to include this in the bill. And then I have just one question for the author of the bill, for Senator Tomassoni, if he would yield.
Senator Tomassoni will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Tomassoni, for your work on this effort, to you and the working group members. One of the things that we are dealing with in the course of balancing this budget is the fact that there is a fair amount of revenue replacement that has come into the budgeting process as a result of the federal funds that came to the state of Minnesota. And it is hard as these bills are coming before us to track that. I think it's about $550 million worth of revenue replacement. So, Senator Tomassoni, as you were putting this budget together, are you able to look ahead to predict where we may have budget shortfalls because some of the funding in this bill is likely one-time funding?
Senator Tomassoni.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Murphy. The federal funding was really hard to get our heads around, if you want to know the truth, because the second tranche of money that came through had not been spent yet by the time we were putting this together, and they're still trying to understand exactly where the third tranche of money is going to go. But the basic understanding of the money is that it is for replacement of expenses and money lost as a result of COVID. And so each campus was actually allocated the money based on certain criteria. And so for us to actually know what the final result will be is going to take us into the next year at least, I think. And then the University of Minnesota, for example, did not realize enough federal money to make up for their lost expenses, so they are actually at a deficit. So the entire situation with the COVID money is fluid at this time. But I share your concerns in trying to exactly understand where all the money is going to go, even though the federal guidelines designate where they can and can't spend it.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Tomassoni. It is an issue that I think as a body we're going to have to continue to track, maybe not in this next year, but in the budget cycle that comes after this. I appreciate your candor with the answer.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, as you look at the role of governance and how we should be doing the role of governance, it's about setting aside our personalization in politics and getting something done across the finish line that meets the unique needs of those individuals in the state of Minnesota that do it. And so with that, Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Tomassoni for expanding the credit for prior learning. There was just some confusion over what that means, what's the work experience, and what this is going to allow is for a gateway or a doorway to be open for folks that had spent many, many years working, or folks that have done some internships and prior credit, to be able to now have access to in a flexible program because of the words that are used in this language. And Senator Tomassoni, grateful for your work on that and working in conjunction with the Minnesota State College and University System folks out there. And with that, I think you're going to create many, many opportunities for a lot of us to enjoy this treasure that we know, which used to be MNSCU, now is the Minnesota State College and University System. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I rise initially just to thank Senator Tomassoni and the members of the Conference Committee who did such great work with the work that we've done all term around issues of higher education. I was so glad to see this bill, impressed by it even. Now, to say I'm impressed by it is actually fairly soft praise when the details, I think, are much more interesting. Because the details of this bill actually speak to the larger spirit that animates it, which to me is what is most impressive. Clearly, this bill acknowledges that today's college student is someone who is working hard to make their life better. And this bill is aware of the fact that that task is so much harder today than it's ever been before. And there's one particular area that I'm incredibly grateful for, and that's the investment in food insecurity and the Hunger-Free Campus Act. This bill will provide not just resources, but opportunities to young people, leadership opportunities to young people on their campuses to design programs, to educate each other, and to have the resources to back that up. Sure, it's going to provide better food pantries for young people, but it's also going to provide them the opportunity to have an impact in their communities and to improve their lives and the lives of their colleagues. So again, I rise to speak in favor of this bill and in gratitude to those of you who did this work to make this bill what it is today. And I encourage a strong positive vote.
The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 18, a bill for an act relating to higher education.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, President Miller. I just wanted to thank the author and the committee for including some more Z-degree funding for the Min-State system. It is a goal of mine to get our two-year degrees to a cost level where students don't have to pay for textbooks. So I really thank the author and the committee for including that in their bill, and just wanted to thank him. Thank you, Mr. President.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank the author, the chairman of the committee. It's a pleasure to serve with him on the conference committee. I also want to thank him for including my portion of a bill in the bill that basically gives our college students a college refund on online classes that were not offered as an online before. I know this is contingent on federal funds, but I know Senator Tomassoni is pretty positive that that will be included, and these students will get refunded on online classes when they're paying a higher tuition cost for those classes. So thank you again, Senator Tomassoni. It was a pleasure to serve on the conference committee with you.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Tomassoni.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to all my colleagues who just heaped all those compliments on this bill. I'm not sure I should say another word because I might screw it up, but I got to say this is a really good bill, and it's legislation that provides crucial investments for the University of Minnesota and for the Minnesota State College and University System, and the bill works to keep college affordable for students and gives them the support they need to be prepared for today's workforce. And so with that, Mr. President, if there's no further comments, I will move to lay the bill on the table.
Senator Tomassoni moves to lay Senate File 18 on the table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The next bill up for consideration is number 2 on general order, Senate File 25. Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, before you is the Ag Bill, the Ag Finance and Rural Broadband Bill. Let me recap this bill. The policy, if you recall, was passed at the end of May in the prior session. So this is primarily the finance portion. I'll just hit the highlights. This is a $10 million target over base in the current biennium, and then $10 million in the tails, as agreed upon under the targets between the House, the Governor, and the Senate. Primary areas of those increase, it funds the Department of Ag, meets their budgetary requests.
Members, it's getting a little loud. I'm having a hard time hearing Senator Westrom. Please take your conversations outside the chamber so we can hear Senator Westrom. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, thank you. Meets their budgetary requests for operations. Think of the Department of Agriculture, many things that they work with farm groups on helping develop new markets, helping with questions or issues relating to agriculture, livestock. The Board of Animal Health is funded under this bill as well, but there's a lot of food inspections and delis and grocery stores and the food supply chain that is inspected under this department, whether it's the dairy processing in the state, dairy farms have dairy inspectors on them, meat inspectors, meat processing, which is a key part of our food supply, and a good food supply system that we all have grown to respect a lot more in the last 15 months, when some of those supplies have been narrowly scarce, and processing has been a problem with COVID-19 and the issues that came along with that. And so I highlight that so we appreciate our food supply and the great work our farmers do to feed our citizens of Minnesota and feed the rest of the country and parts of the world. But the Department of Ag continues those basic operations that many times go on behind the scenes, unnoticed, but we all benefit from good, reliable, safe food supply, and we're better for that, to be able to make sure there is that ample food supply. So members, some of where the $10 million new budget target went is the agri account. We have put $6 million a year or $12 million into the biofuel infrastructure. Senator Dahms had this bill, but many of us supported this as part of the E15 efforts that we've had in the Capitol, in the Senate, to help expand more infrastructure opportunities for homegrown fuels. Much from our corn farmers, but we have those homegrown fuels here in Minnesota that we can grow and we can use as energy sources. Many of our stations need to update some pumps so they can have an E15 or greater ethanol blend to offer to the market. Many already enjoy this E15 opportunity. Many times it's the 88% blend that many of you fill up. Recently at Holiday, Quick Trip, some of those Casey's, some of those common gas stations we all are familiar with here in Minnesota. In many cases, they're selling that E15 blend for 5, 10, and recently I saw it up to 15 cents less than the regular 87% octane with just a 10% ethanol blend here in Minnesota. So we're putting a lot of emphasis, a lot of priority into making those pump updates across the state to burn more ethanol, burn more homegrown fuels. And so I want to emphasize and thank the House and the conferees and the leadership for us to be able to make that significant investment. This is a major investment into more homegrown fuels. Members, recently I was at an event with the governor back in April on the western suburbs, highlighting an E15 pump and what it meant for that retailer. Looking at statistics then, members, recently when an E15 pump goes in, it increases the sale of E15 by nearly 200,000 gallons a year. That translates into more ethanol sales, which is processed and made right here in Minnesota. And so that's how significant this infrastructure will be, helping our gas stations, the smaller ones, 10 and under is what we agreed to with the House, with a grant of 65% for them to update those stations, those pumps, and if they're a smaller station, they're eligible to get these updates to help spread out across the state this opportunity. Relating to biofuels, bioincentives, we came to an agreement with the House on $4.5 million a year for continuing to match the bioincentives. This is commonly referred to as similar to the ethanol program that we had back in the 90s that started a dozen or more ethanol plants that are still running here in the state today. This bioincentive is this new generation of biofuels, bioenergies, and we've got Senator Rarick, we've got other senators that have companies in their district that are expanding with new products and creating jobs and creating this new type of energy source under the bioincentives at $4.5 million a year or $9 million over the biennium. Those are two major areas we've invested in this bill. A few other highlights, members, under the Agri account. We've authorized dollars to go to the livestock investment grants. Meat is a very important part of our food chain supply. We want to make sure we've got farmers expanding their operations, updating their operations, bringing back their children or selling to somebody that wants to get into it. That livestock investment grant is valuable for that to happen. But along with the livestock investment, we've got the meat processing that we've done in this bill. It was an effort that the Senate had brought forward. The House has agreed to it. And we're going to also agree to the new meat cutting or meat processing specialist through AURI, ORI, with $150,000. So in total, we're putting upwards of $1 million into a mobile meat cutting unit, as well as investment at the Central Lakes campus in Staples for meat processing or meat cutting curriculum to bring more workers into that field, because there's such a demand for workers in the meat cutting industry and our small butcher shops. They're just begging to try to find people that are trained and able to do that. And so this is a bill that we have adopted here as well. Senator Ruud brought it forward, along with many others here in the Senate that have supported that meat cutting and meat expansion opportunity that is in this bill. A few other highlights. We've got language in here that deals with emerging farmers. Many new immigrants or new residents to our state are getting involved in agriculture. We've got language we worked out with the House on allowing some dollars to be used for translation or focus on emerging farmers that the Department of Ag will help blend into new markets and bring opportunities for new farmers, new residents of the state to get into the agriculture industry. Some money for urban agriculture as well. They all many times tie together. Also money for farm to school, $800,000 of new money. When we talk about the smaller farmers or the truck farms, the vegetables that are raised and sold at farmers markets, they are also sold at our schools, and that's called farm to school. We've increased that for those farmers that raise those crops, $800,000 to help the schools across the state connect with these markets and pay for those products, to have those local foods brought in and sold at our schools across the state. That was a major increase in this bill as well. And so, members, we've also funded mental health. We've also increased, Senator Dornick had a bill for some increased dollars to Second Harvest Heartland, one of the regional food banks in the state that serves many of our smaller regional food hubs across the state, buying in bigger quantity and then helping all the food shelves across our state, the north and the south and the east and the west. And so, members, that increase is in here as well. And so, let me touch on a couple of quick other areas, and then any questions, Mr. President. But AURI, I've mentioned, their base budget is in here, just about $8.6 million, just over $8 million was their base, with the mobile meat unit that I talked about and the meat processing position that we're funding. It's about $8.6 million in the biennium. We also fund the Board of Animal Health. Their base budget is in here. That's a very important aspect for livestock and agriculture in our state. And members, rural broadband is also been a key focus, a very important focus for rural Minnesota, getting them last miles, those very rural areas, deep rural areas, built out with broadband. We fund the Office of Broadband under this bill. We have agreement and target of $70 million, but right now that $70 million appears to be probably going to be carried in the bonding bill, and it's not in this bill right now, but we anticipate it'll be in the bonding bill. But the $700,000 for the office administration is in this bill. So, Mr. President, that's a recap of this bill. Happy to stand for any questions. Members, I urge your support to help keep our farmers developing new markets and doing the great job that they do to raise food and feed our state and our country.
Discussion on Senate File 25. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Westrom. Also want to thank Mr. Hansen for the work on the bill. Just a couple of quick comments about why I am a yes on the bill. First of all, Senator Westrom, thank you for your continued work on biofuels and E15. Folks, these fuels burn cleaner and we grow them here. Those are two really good reasons for us to continue the effort. Also want to say thank you for the appropriation for Green Seam. As many of you know, Green Seam is the Southern Minnesota Agricultural Promotion Council based in Mankato. We're talking about branding for agriculture in Minnesota, and we're talking about talent recruitment. We want people to come work in Minnesota agribusiness, and this bill provides funding for Green Seam to continue that work. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Westrom, for walking us through the bill. Because I wasn't a part of the working group, it is good to hear the presentation of the bill, both in the Finance Committee and then today here on the floor. I'm wondering if Senator Westrom would be willing to yield for one question.
Senator Westrom will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And Senator Westrom, in the Finance Committee yesterday, the issue of market bucks was raised, and the absence of that proposal in this agriculture bill. For those who haven't been following along, market bucks is a very high impact, low cost effort to make sure that Minnesotans who receive SNAP benefits are able to use a $10 coupon at farmers markets across the state to buy fresh carrots, fresh broccoli, fresh tomatoes, fresh potatoes. Altogether, the proposal in the past has cost $650,000. It has a statewide impact, and there were a lot of people concerned that it wasn't included because, especially coming out of the global pandemic, access to local farmers' produce, carrots, peas, tomatoes, potatoes, is a real important thing. And as people talk about market bucks, they talk about it as a win-win-win. Local farmers getting their goods to farmers markets, pumping money into local economies, and then making sure that people who are hungry have access to fresh carrots. So my question for you, Senator Westrom, is in follow-up to the conversation that happened in the Finance Committee yesterday, and I'm wondering if you could give me an update on any progress on this topic in terms of including it in the Ag Bill or in the State Government Finance Bill. Thank you.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Murphy, I don't have any new update really on that provision. This provision, as you know, when we worked through finance bills, it wasn't in the Senate bill originally. The language, as we worked out compromises, other things became a higher priority for either the House or the Senate, and the money only stretches so far. I did highlight one of the areas that we ended up putting a lot more money into, which was the farm to school, and that's generally a lot of the same farmers providing that vegetable, potatoes, carrots, apples, the farm products to the school districts. And so that's getting an $800,000 increase. This bill doesn't have the market bucks, but Senator Murphy, we followed up, and I thought it was true, and it is in fact true, that these dollars don't have to be matched from the state. They can be matched from any private source or third-party source. What that does is it's a federal grant that is out there, so a nonprofit would get money passed through from the state to raise their match, which the state, of course, has been very generous with food supply, but but they can raise this money from other sources, foundations, whether it's Cargill, whether it's any other ag group or foundation, or other nonprofits that can help raise that match, and they can get dollar for dollar match on the federal level. It doesn't have to be the state that just puts the money in to leverage that money. And so that's good news. Collectively, between public and private dollars, they can hopefully accomplish that. But that is in fact what they can do to help leverage that federal money. That's still available if the need is there. But members also, Senator Murphy, and I think I reiterated this before, the market bucks isn't an either-or option. The SNAP recipients can use those same government benefits to buy the products at the farmer's market, just like they can buy at the grocery store. And so those SNAP dollars can still be used at the farmer's markets with or without the Market Bucks program.
Further discussion, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Westrom. And please don't take my questions as a critique of the important provisions that have been added to this bill since the target went up. And I am happy about farm to school, really happy about urban ag. There are a number of provisions in this bill that are stronger than when it left us at the end of May. But you do raise an important issue, Senator Westrom, and that is the potential federal match that could be lost, and likely would be lost, if Market Bucks is not included in either the ag bill or, as Senator Kiffmeyer mentioned yesterday, in the state government finance bill. And for those who were listening to Senator Westrom just now, I would like to just reiterate that if we fund Market Bucks with that $650,000, which when you think about the state budget of $52 billion, $650,000, that's a lot of money. But in the scope and scheme of $52 billion, it's literally budget dust. But it is meaningful to people who are getting food support through SNAP. So in addition to that SNAP benefit, they get a $10 coupon to buy carrots at a local farmer's market. Not small potatoes, important potatoes for a family that is hungry. And the USDA has said, we like that idea, and we will give you $325,000 more as a match to match this state appropriation. So nearly $1 million of food support for local farmers for the things that they grow. It's a good deal. Everybody keeps saying, why isn't it included? It's a win-win-win. A win for local economies, a win for local farmers, a win for hungry Minnesotans. And so before this session is done, I think we have to find a way to put that $650,000 into one of the state budget bills. It's important for Minnesotans. President Miller, would Senator Rosen yield for a question, please?
Senator Rosen will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Senator Rosen. I know that you are the chair of the Finance Committee, and you had donuts and coffee for those of us that attended the hearing yesterday. Thank you for that kindness. I am wondering if you have an update for me or for anybody on the floor about the potential of a solution to finding a home for Market Bucks in the state's budget.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Murphy, for the question. Actually, I'm a little surprised by the question because we have been exchanging texts back and forth. So you know about as much as I know at this point. And it is, Market Bucks has become a priority here in the last few days. Apparently, it has received some attention in the Star Tribune, although I don't know if the information in the Star Tribune is exactly right. From what I understand, the conversations in the conference committee were about, but I know the leaders are trying to find a path to support Market Bucks, and I leave it to their responsibility, and I have great faith in the three leaders.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Rosen. And I didn't mean to surprise you, and if I could, I'd turn around and look at you and smile, but that's against the rules. So I didn't mean to surprise you, but there are many people outside of this body who are paying attention to this issue, and they would like us to find a resolution. And I understand how the legislature does its work, but the cone of silence leaves a lot of people in Minnesota behind. And so I thought it was important to share here the hopeful update, that there may be a path forward. And also to say, for instance, if the three leaders are unable, and I really hope that they are, and Senator Rosen, I know that you're probably engaged in some of those conversations. So I hope that we're able to find a solution. But I also want to say that if, for instance, the House bill that comes to us doesn't include a resolution here, then we should work together to try and find a place. And I want to say that I want to work with you and others to find a place for this important, though inexpensive, very effective market bucks program. And with that, I thank you.
Further discussion on the bill, Senator Dietzich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to follow up on what Senator Murphy was talking about. So there are 99 farmers markets across the state that accept market bucks. They are truly all across the state. There has been a 30% increase over the last year in use of market bucks. Majority of the users are seniors. So we're taking food away from seniors. It's just a small amount of money. And I talked to the executive director this morning, and she said, you know, they have confirmed that they can go out and find some additional money. It doesn't have to come from the government, but to quickly turn around, because that grant is coming up in July. So to quickly turn around and raise that money is challenging at this last minute. And so, you know, it would be really helpful to literally find that small amount of money. So I urge the finance chair and the leadership to find that money. And just to give you an idea, so Senator Dornick down in Albert Lee Farmers Market, they have about $1,600 of market bucks redeemed. Senator Eichhorn in Grand Rapids area, about $9,200 of market bucks have been redeemed. Senator Limmer in Maple Grove area farmers market, about $3,900 market bucks. Senator Newman in the Hutchinson downtown farmers market, about $1,700. So this is truly going all across the state. The Rochester Downtown Farmers Market, about $9,800. In Wadena, I believe that's Senator Gazelka's district, $1,600, $1,700. And in President Miller, Winona Farmers Market, about $2,700. This is good use. This is $10. And so if you haven't been to your farmer's market lately, right now you can buy fresh asparagus, about $4, $5. You know, later on, you know, we've all had that fresh strawberries, and you might be able to go buy them cheaper in the store, but just getting that fresh picked strawberries or fresh picked blueberries or fresh picked corn is so good and so great that this helps the farmers and this helps individuals. And I think we want to be encouraging more people to eat healthier food. And so if we can, you know, give them a little extra dollars, $10 here, maybe another $10 here, they can buy fresh broccoli, carrots, radishes, those freshly picked strawberries, blueberries, and that Minnesota corn that we all love and look forward to in August. I think this is very important. It is across the state, and it is a small amount, but it makes a big difference. And so I encourage the leadership to continue to do this. As Senator Westrom said, the state is very generous, and they have been generous on this program. We are very generous to a lot of programs, and this small amount will help farmers and help seniors and help families. And so I encourage us to figure this out and get it included in one of the bills. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill, Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I, too, arise on this subject of the market bucks. 6 years ago, I and a number of other community members started a farmers market in the community of New Brighton. And we knew that it would be one of those events that our community would look forward to, that would draw people into the community, and it has for 6 years. And even though we had COVID last year and weren't able to bring in the crafters and some of the specialty foods, we had farmers that came in and brought their produce. They brought fresh produce every single week, and every single week we looked for what was new in the farmers market. Across from our farmers market is a senior living establishment. And every Wednesday, we see our seniors come across the street to buy their fresh vegetables and breads and other items. And they will walk by us in our tent at the farmers market and show us the beautiful beans they just bought, the fresh peas that they bought. They're going to tell us about the rhubarb cake that they're going to make. These are the people that we are helping with these market bucks. These are the people where $10 a week can make all of the difference, because it actually turns into $20 a week of fresh vegetables that they might not be able to receive because they aren't able to get to the grocery store, or their produce goes bad before they're able to use it. The money that is also available through SNAP is available for families with children. And what better way to teach healthy habits than bringing your child to a farmer's market and letting them choose the vegetables that they're going to take home and prepare. The other group that is available or has access to those market bucks are disabled communities. And I have been there at the farmer's market where a van will pull up and a group of our community members with disability will get out and they'll do their shopping for their fresh produce. These are all people that are going to be impacted by the fact that no longer are they able to access it. And just as Senator Disick said, yes, maybe we can drum up some other folks to pay for this. But this is our responsibility for creating a healthy community, for a healthy state. And these aren't big corporate farmers that are bringing in their goods. These are small farmers with specialty items that we look forward to because we've built those relationships over time. And so when we invest just that, what is it, $365,000 from the state, which is really chump change in the big picture, and add that to what the federal government will include in there. We are investing in our farmers, our small farmers, who you know are struggling every single season. We're now in a drought, the water tables have dropped, they're struggling. But when they can bring that produce into a farmer's market and know that they are feeding communities, that is a reward that we can never measure. But we can measure our investment in our communities. And so I would ask the senators that are still working on this issue to please find a way to continue this. My phone has been dinging right and left with folks that are so hurt and so dismayed that this might go away. It's such a small investment, Minnesota. It's an investment that we just can't let go by the side. So I would ask, once again, for folks to find a way to continue this without interruption. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just like to thank Senator Murphy for bringing up this issue, and to all my friends and our colleagues across the aisle. I really appreciate the support that you're giving to our local farmers and the attention that we're giving to healthy eating and making a path forward. Believe me, this is an issue, when I say just has received a tremendous amount of attention in last 3 days, 4 days perhaps. So it is an issue that we are finding a path forward without divulging any secrets that are coming from the governor's office right now. But I can guarantee this message and this discussion on the Senate floor will be conveyed to our leader and to the speaker and to the governor. So with that, stay tuned. Thank you very much for this discussion and support.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Bigham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too was pretty shocked when I read about this with the market bucks and the farmers markets. You know, I have farmers markets actually going on right now in Cottage Grove, and then we have them in Hastings and Newport and South St. Paul, and you know, and I don't mean a pun, but they're very organically grown for community support, and it's just really a good way to enjoy your community. And you know, I guess I don't understand the rationale for deleting this and getting rid of this money, and for this very important program. And you know, the local farmers are very proud to support the farmers markets and really participate in their community. And so I've received emails from the various organizers of my farmers markets, and it's just disheartening. So I'm hoping that you know, Senator Rosen is committed to trying to find a path to resolve this, because I just think it's unnecessary. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some good news coming out of the tribunal soon related to this.
Further discussion on the bill. Senator Johnson-Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'll keep this brief just to bring up a few things that have not been brought up. Again, about market bucks. I can't believe how closely that has hit home in my community as well. And I think the reason is because this is one of a very few tangible benefits that we can provide for people that is both immediate, effective, instant, and really enhances their life. I know for many of us, $10, an extra $10 is not a big deal. It is a big deal for many people. And Senator Westrom, you mentioned that SNAP money can be used at local farmers markets. To be sure, it can be used at grocery stores. But I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that an incentive to get people to a farmer's market with an additional $10 a week is ineffective. It can be extremely effective for somebody that is has a low income. And so I just want to remind us that $10 seems like a very small amount, but if we give that to somebody every week, it can make a significant difference. If you've not shopped at the farmer's market, $10 actually buys a lot of food, and I would very much urge my colleagues to find a way to fund this. Thank you.
The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 25, a bill for an act relating to agriculture, establishing a budget for the Department of Agriculture.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, members, briefly, thank you for the good discussion on the bill and the many positive aspects. Members, with the market buck discussion, let me just add a little bit more to it. It's not all black and white, straightforward. It's certainly a priority that we talked about. There was things in the Senate bill that we didn't get. The House didn't want to make this a big enough priority, although they had it in their initial bill, but they had other things they wanted worse. We had to give things up. We offered different scenarios that would take this. The House wouldn't take it, wouldn't take Senate language on some other provisions. Livestock investment grants, we wanted to make that into the tails. They made us give that up as part of the trades. There's livestock issues. Senator Weber has a significant issue for our livestock farmers. We tried to work out. The House would not work that out. So members, I want to share that with you so there's a little better context. Now, we could have, instead of put $800,000 new dollars into the farm to school, we could have probably found it here, but that just wasn't in the formulas as we were negotiating back and forth, trying to stretch the dollars and make them. But those are the same farmers that are going to benefit from that aid going to schools to get to even all the school kids, or many more school kids across the state with these locally grown produce and vegetables and opportunities. So I share that with you. The other thing, as we looked at the program, many from St. Paul, I can understand why you would argue harder for it, because your constituents are benefiting the most from it. According to the Star Tribune, 33% of the market bucks are landing in St. Paul at 14 farmers markets, while many farmers markets in my district are too small, so they aren't even eligible to receive the market bucks, because the equipment is so costly that the state makes them put in if they're going to receive this program. There's also safeguards that I'm not real sure are in place, as they talked about it in committee. $10 a transaction. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how fast and easy it would be to bilk that system. And I'm not saying they are, but they can't say they aren't either. It's $10 a time they qualify as they transact it. Well, nothing stops them from going from one market to the next the same day and getting that same $10 subsidy. Whether they spend $11 and get a $10 subsidy, or if they spend $55, they get the same $10 subsidy on top of the SNAP benefits they're already receiving. So there are several questions that should be answered with this program if it's going to be only the state funding it. But members, it doesn't have to be just the state. There are lots of generous people, lots of generous companies and organizations out there, and the state can't be the answer for every matching grant from the federal government. The reason they put federal government matches out there is to incentivize private donations, people that have a passion for certain things to leverage that money, and it doesn't have to just be the state of Minnesota. And so I would urge you to broaden your view on this, broaden your thinking that there are ways to make sure we get this to $325,000. We should make sure there's more protections in place so that $10 is going to the intent to be the once a week subsidy that it's intended for those that are benefiting or those that are on SNAP already, and there's not misuse. But when 33% of the funding goes all to St. Paul, according to the Star Tribune, one has to scratch your head a little bit and say, where's the fairness? Where's the equity in the rest of rural Minnesota that has to separate and spread out the other 66%? And if you look at the map, the vast majority stays in the metro. That's because our rural farmers markets that are smaller don't often have the equipment and the expensive program to run to get the market bucks. So there are several things that should be figured out if this program is going to continue and the state is going to be the only subsidizer of it. But hopefully we can find a way to do it. But I raised those questions so you realize we looked into this quite in depth. We went back and forth with the House on many things. There are some unanswered questions in this, but ultimately the good news is the resolution to this is through the generosity of the folks that want to keep it. They can all help find and raise the money, and hopefully this debate will help participate in the nonprofit that's benefiting from this to help be able to go to other generous folks and raise the money and leverage that federal money and help make that market bucks possible in the selective areas that it is available in Minnesota. But it's not across the entire state at all the farmers markets. So I want to make sure people understand that. Mr. Chair, members, this is a good bill. It funds the Department of Agriculture. Food security, food safety, food supply is very important. Developing new markets, promoting and using our homegrown fuels and energies is very valuable for our economy, for our farmers, in creating those markets and the supply that they provide. And so, members, with that, I urge your support. But, Mr. President, at this point in time, I would move to lay this bill on the table.
Senator Westrom moves to lay Senate File 25 on the table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The next bill up for consideration is number 3 on general orders, Senate File 19, Senator Dahms.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. And Senate File 19 is the Commerce, Consumer Protection, and Energy Omnibus Bill. And I will go ahead and just make some brief comments, and then I'll go through it article by article, what affects e-commerce, and then at that point, Senator Senjum can go through what affects energy, and then we can take questions. So to start with, we had a $16 million target for the first biennium, $8 million in tails. Of the $16 million, $8 million of that was designated to go to solar on schools in the non-RDA XL energy territory. So it's actually an 8 and an 8. We did also have an increase of $838,000 in the target, and that was to go to the Commerce Law Enforcement Division increases in salaries. So under the general fund appropriations on the Article 1, the department had requested, had some agency priorities of increased funding for the insurance, financial institutions, and weight and measures divisions. We did take care of that through the general fund, through the target that we had. Also, we had we accepted some language from the House on the catalytic converter project, pilot project, and that was to the tune of $400,000. And then we also had the Minnesota Council on Economic Education. That was a Howe bill, and that was included. And then there was a cancellation of $1.2 million from the FY year the 2021 appropriation, which was put back into the system. Article 2 will apply to energy, and under Article 3, we did have the 3 NAIC bills requested by the department, and those were included in the bill. We also had the modification for the workers' compensation information for the data services organizations. That was an UTKI bill, that is included. And then the department had their commerce technical bill, and that was included. There was some opioid screening and testing limits bill that was sponsored by Senator Cran, that was included. And then the prescription anti-kickback definition modification, and that was a House provision that we accepted. Under Article 4, we have the mandated health benefit evaluation proposal, and that was a bill that was in the Senate bill when it went to the conference committee, and that was authored by Senator Benson. Article 5 is the collection agencies and debt buyers, and that was language that after it was worked on and some changes were made, we were able to come to an agreement with the House on that language, and so that bill was accepted with the changes. And then under Article 6, there are some different consumer protection bills that are included. We had the Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights, that was a Duckworth bill, and that was worked out and included in the final bill here at Senate File 19. The Volunteer Driver Modification, that was a Jasinski bill, and with some changes in that, that was also included in the bill. As I mentioned, the Catalytic Converter Pilot Project, that's included. And then there was a Toxic Toys bill, which is a priority of the agency. And after some changes on that, that bill was agreed to by both the House and the Senate. And then there was the Self-Storage Units Modification Bill. That was also a House priority, but after some changes and negotiations on that between legal aid and the storage units groups, that bill came together, so that bill is also included. Under Article 7, we have the broadband easement language, and that was a bill carried by Senator Westrom. And then under Article 9, we have the law enforcement salaries, which I picked up a little earlier. So all in all, we think that we came out with a pretty good bill. So, you know, there's some things that maybe some people don't like in the bill. There's some things that I think some of us like quite well, but it's one of those situations to when you're negotiating, if everybody comes out a little disgruntled, you probably got a pretty good bill. So with that said, members, I would ask Senator Senjum go through the articles that deal with energy, and then we'd certainly be happy to open it up for questions. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'll just speak to the energy portion of this particular conference report. I guess it's not a conference report yet, but the bill as it will go forward, at least for your consideration. And let me just, before I do that, I need to, certainly on the energy side, I know Senator Dahms will do the same relative to commerce, but to thank Darren Lee and Allie Gunstrom. Darren being committee administrator, Allie being our researcher that helped so much in terms of putting this bill together, and of course Casey Mumm in Senate Finance from the standpoint of our fiscal person, and certainly Carlin Doyle-Fontaine, our Senate consul that worked on this. But just going to the bill, certainly it funds the energy portion of the Commerce Department as well as the Public Utilities Commission. And then going forward more specifically with respect to projects, one of the elements certainly within the Energy Telecommunications Committee has to do with, in this case, closed captioning. As we've grown in committees within the Senate and as there's more committee meetings in different places, there's been a need for some additional equipment to assist in closed captioning, and so there's $310,000 general fund dollars in that, and maybe take half a step backward. Within this bill, there's about $10 million worth of general fund funding, and we committed to about $48 million of renewable development account funding going into the future. So again, about $300,000 for closed captioning, solar on schools, in both $8 million in RDA areas as well as, and that's basically the XL area, and another 8 for non-XL schools, area schools, and that is general fund money. And then we did a couple of, we did something that maybe first time ever, as we talked about solar, and this bill, Mr. President, member, is pretty strong on solar. We added solar on the Minnesota State College campuses, and so we've got $1.2 million in the first year and $1.1 million in the second year. Both $1.1 million and $1.2 million, $1.1 million in both the RDA areas as well as the non-RDA areas. So we'll begin to seeing some solar on our community technical colleges, and there's been a little bit of a request to do that, and I think it's going to go even further. Also with respect to this bill, first time we're going to, I think, as I know, at least put solar on landfills. And so Senator Pratt had a bill relative to the Anoka landfill, which we've cleaned up the process of, actually with respect to bonding money, but we'll take $100,000, pay off those bonds, and that will then release that land for solar development. And that $100,000 will come out of the general fund, but go back into the the proceeds on the lease payments for that will go back into the general fund. Now, to move a little quickly, or more quickly, another new program has to do with what we call host cities, and these are the cities which host major utility facilities around the state of Minnesota. And between now and maybe 2035. Most of these facilities are probably going to be closed, and so this puts into place within DEED an office to assist cities as they move through this process in the next 20 years or so, 15 to 20 years, to assist them in that transition from being a major utility city into something else. So that's important. Moving on, and this is renewable development account money. I'll just go through these relatively quickly as well. We've got a clean energy career planning program within the city of Minneapolis in the north side there, and in an area that is craving, if you will, for this kind of a thing. Senator Chamberlain bill, $10 million for an ammonia hydrogen research program at the University of Minnesota Morris. That's Senator Westrom's bill. Senator Friend's, the State Building Energy Conservation Revolving Loan Fund, a great program, I think, going forward in terms of what we're going to be doing with respect to developing energy efficiency, solar, et cetera, on state buildings. Also, again, coming back to the community college thing, as we look at the solar rewards program, $10 million there going forward. We go to Mr. President, Mountain Iron, and your particular facility up there that is one of the major solar panel companies in the upper Midwest. we're giving them $5.5 million to, and apparently they're going to double in size. So that's a lot of economic development going forward in Mountain Iron in your area. The St. Thomas University Microgrid Center right here in St. Paul do a great job with respect to researching this area. They've got another $5.4 million going to enhance their program. We've got about $580,000 for a weatherization study through the Minnesota Agricultural Extension Service. That will help both farmers. It will help, I think, in our bonding decisions relative to weather patterns across Minnesota, what's happening, what did happen, what's going to happen. And this is for supercomputer time so that they can better analyze this for us and make predictions for us. I think that's going to be a good thing. $125,000 for a Buy Clean, Buy Fair program. It has to do with looking at construction products, carbon emissions from them, and making decisions about what's appropriate and what might be the best product going forward. This will be at a study phase, but I think as time moves on, this world is going to get more and more looking at decarbonization and emissions and what's a good product and what's a bad product. So we've got another project called the Minnesota Efficient Technology Accelerator Program, and again, looking at advancing technology in this renewable energy world and time that we're in. Senator Matthews has a project in here that has to do with, again, the closure of these utility plants, what happens to the workers, what happens to their future, their career, their pensions, and things like that. That addresses those things. Senator Weber's Renewable Energy Innovation Act, pardon me, not renewable energy, Natural Gas Innovation Act, again, looking at how we innovate natural gas from the standpoint of whether it be biogas, hydrogen, ammonia, moving, again, away from fossil fuels in the long-term future, and how we get there. CenterPoint Energy is particularly interested in that. Extended the cold weather weatherization rule from October 1st to end of April. That was an amendment on this floor as we considered this bill initially. We've got wind turbine lighting. Anybody that lives in wind turbine country knows the blinking lights. This would allow a radio frequency aspect of that, such as the light only blinks when the airplane comes. So that's going to be allowed within this bill. And Mr. Chair and members, I think that's it, at least for now. We certainly take questions. I just maybe comment that this bill, as I think we all recognize, our community, our state, our country, our world is moving towards a different kind of energy future. This bill, albeit a small step, I think takes us in that direction, and certainly urge your positive consideration of it as it comes off the table eventually and is considered for a formal vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Senjum, that solar plant is the only solar panel manufacturing plant in the upper Midwest. Any further discussion? Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senators Dahms and Senjum. I'd like to start by saying I'm a yes when we come to the point of voting, and also say this was a bill where the process worked, in my opinion, about like it was supposed to. Our counterparts in the House, Representative Stevenson, Representative Long, fairly open process. Senator Dahms and Senator Senjum, you're to be commended for the compromising that went on here, which is sort of how we picture it. And for members who were not directly involved, you've got your conferees, you've got your ranking members. I think this bill represents the kind of process that the people of Minnesota would like to see more of. I'm a yes for a lot of the reasons that Senator Dahms and Senator Senjum mentioned, but on the energy side, obviously those things that move us forward in solar, I'm a fan of that. I think we have to do that. Also, some of the individual projects in the RDA, I think, offer us the innovation that Minnesota is so well known for. Ammonia, for example, the Building Efficiency Fund. I'd like to see those things take us places that'll be much improved over our past energy consumption. But what's not in the bill, in my opinion, is not a reason to vote no on it. But I would just point out for the body, the House passed 100% clean energy bill by 2040. That's not in here. I'm sorry about that. The nation's moving to decarbonization, and I think that would have been a provision worth including. Senator Senjum, you know I'm a fan of the Clean Energy First provision. That's not in the bill, and I hope that as we go forward as a body that we'll continue to look at the big changes. Electric vehicles gets a lot of discussion here, and as what I consider to be a car guy, I'm watching two of the great American companies of all time, Ford and General Motors, battle in the press every day for which one is going to electric vehicles faster. General Motors already declaring they'll be all electric by 2035. And I'd offer us this thought. Does the state of Minnesota want to be ahead of the curve on electric vehicles, just kind of status quo, or behind? Because as I've heard Senator Senjum say in the past, the train's coming down the tracks. It's my suggestion for this body that we should be ahead of the curve. Let's be leaders. Let's move forward with EV infrastructure and electric vehicle rebates. I think that's a better plan. And to the ultimate question of decarbonization, in which, to be frank, the energy sector's made some improvements in Minnesota. Our other sectors like transportation and industry, not so much. Just remember, members, we had in 2007 a bipartisan agreement to set decarbonization goals. Both parties got behind the idea that we would reduce carbon emissions by 30% by 2025. And why did we do that? Because at the time, the evidence of the need to decarbonize, which is known as climate change, to everybody seemed to be pretty clear. Fast forward to 2021, and now we're having some trouble agreeing on whether those goals are still important. We've only made 8% progress towards that goal, and it's 2021. It doesn't look to me like this bill is going to help us make the kind of major moves that we need to make if those goals still matter. Mr. President, I thought about asking a member of the body to stand and answer a question, but I'm not going to do that. I think I'll just pose it for the body and say, do we as a Senate feel that those 2007 goals to reduce emissions 30% are now somehow out of date? Because we have to accept we're not on track to meet them. And if they're not out of date and this bill and other bills do not move us towards those goals, what are we telling the people of Minnesota? That the goals that we at one time both parties agreed to now don't make sense? I wouldn't take that. I'd say if you look at the evidence, we need to make these kinds of changes, and yes, they're going to be big changes. And no, I personally actually don't like change that much as a person, but I can see our need as you look at what's happening with climate change around the state and around the country and around the world. We're going to have to do something, and I merely make these comments to ask the body, as I hope we get ready to support this bill, that we're going to have to do something, or the people of Minnesota are going to be saying, hey, why didn't you do something? You had all the evidence there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Dahms yield?
Senator Dahms will yield. Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. President, again. Senator Dahms, I watched the finance hearing yesterday and had questions on the catalytic converters. So the same time Senator Marty was working on the bill about a year ago, I was also hearing from my colleagues at Hennepin County on the number of catalytic converter thefts in Hennepin County, and I know it has skyrocketed, especially in the metro, but I believe all across the state. One of my constituents sent me an email just this past week where she, so they're happening. I had an earlier constituent where I think it was $1,700, $1,800. They were hit outside of their home, just parked on the street. And then the constituent this past week, she was at, I believe, Afton State Park. So while she was out hiking the park, someone came in and stole their catalytic converter from her car. That was about a $2,000 bill. So this is an important issue, so I am glad that we are addressing it in this bill. And so part of this is just for clarity and for the record in case there are any questions. But if you go to page 86 in the bill, 86.2, this is purchase or acquisition record required. So any person who purchases or receives a catalytic converter must comply with this section. Then if you go down to line 86.24, it says, in order to purchase a detached catalytic converter. So I just want to clarify for the record, because above it says purchases or receives. So if a person decides, I'm not going to purchase it, but I'm going to receive it, do they also have to record any of these markings? I just want it for clarity's sake so that we can maybe tighten it up, because there's an inconsistency in those two lines.
Senator Dahms.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Dietzig, it's my understanding that if you're going to receive a catalytic converter, basically people receiving catalytic converters would be folks that if it's a catalytic converter that no longer functions, that it would be going through a salvage yard. If it's going through the salvage yard, there are statutes on the books now that deal with that.
Senator Dietzig.
Okay, follow up. Will Senator Dahms continue to yield?
He will yield.
Thank you. Again, I just want to get this on the record because we've had so many of these. I think any little bit helps to clarify what this new law is. And I know with salvage dealers, pawn shops, there are additional laws already in place, but part of why we're doing this is because they weren't able to address some of these. And then I just want to, again, for clarity, so we have the, on page 87, there's the Cadillac converter theft preventing, there's the pilot project. And so they're going to provide funding and literally mark these converters. I believe there was a story in the Star Tribune recently where it talked about, you know, you can go pay $60 and somebody will put the VIN number on the Cadillac converter or spray paint it. And so similar to what the pilot prevention does. And so what I'm curious on this line 86.24, so is it just the pilot project that they have to record any identification, or does anybody who goes to purchase a detached Cadillac converter have to, you know, put in that information and then also the name and person who removed the Cadillac converter? So is that everybody who purchases or receives a Cadillac converter has to provide this information and keep track of this information, or is it just part of this pilot project, so certain areas that are part of the pilot project?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dietzig, would you repeat the line number and repeat your comment again?
Senator Dietzig.
So on page 87, we have the pilot project, and they're going to be marking the converters. And then if you look at 86.24, starting in section 8, it says that in order to purchase the converter, you have to keep track of any numbers, barcodes, stickers, or any other unique markings that result from the pilot project. So it's a pilot project, so not everybody is involved in the pilot project. And so if I'm not in an area where they're doing the pilot project, do I still have to keep track of some of these unique markings and also the name of the person who removed the Cadillac converter? Or is it, if you just know you're in a pilot project area, that you have to do this?
Well, thank you, Senator Dietzig.
Dahms.
And thank you, Mr. President and Senator Dietzig. It's my understanding that if this would be if you're in the pilot project. Now, a lot of these rules and things are going to be decided by the Department of Commerce when they put this into place and work with the repair shops. So this is an outline, and so I'm not sure if my assumption is the answer to your question is that if you're in a pilot project, because this language deals with the pilot project, it deals with who will help organize the pilot project, what the markings will be, and how that'll have to be followed.
Senator Dietzig.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Dahms. I think that's helpful. I think this is a good start. It's good guidelines. This is costing a lot of people, and it's not just our individual constituents that are getting hit. $1,600, $1,700, $2,000. There was a small hardware store right outside of my district into Senator Marty's district, and so they were also hit, where they went in and broke into that business and then ransacked the place and stole a bunch of equipment that they need that makes it easier to steal these converters. And so I think this is a very good start. It is a project that we should continue to keep our eye on, because this is costing our constituents. And so thank you for this, and I hope that we keep track of, encourage people to keep track of what the Commerce Department is doing, because I think this is a pilot project now. I think we have to creatively figure out what to do statewide. Thank you.
Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Dahms, for bringing this bill forward. I just want to express my appreciation for the outcome of this bill as a lead in the Commerce Division. I certainly was very vocal about some changes I wanted to see in the bill, including one that was adopted, which was the elimination of the extension of reinsurance. And I know that the reinsurance has been a successful program to some, and mostly to deal with the individual market after federal healthcare reform, and we certainly have had to deal with that, and I believe that it's done its duty, and I would have had to be convinced that we would need to renew it. So given the recent administration's job in passing the American Rescue Plan, there is a new way of dealing with those insurance premiums and potential destabilization of the insurance marketplace, and now members, all of our constituents can apply for these additional federal tax credits that are available as of April 1st. So just want to make sure that we do that public announcement that we are indeed tackling the issue of increased premiums in the individual market. A lot of us got those emails years ago when we first were enrolling into the federal healthcare reform, also known as Obamacare. And now we are not extending this program of reinsurance. It will end as of December 31st. And I think that is a good way to move forward, not including a significant amount of state dollars that would have had gone to this program when it was technically unnecessary and potentially double dipping if we're already having some federal assistance from the federal government, like I mentioned. So from now on, the new rule at the federal level is that no one will pay more than 8.5% of their household income towards the premium cost on one of the benchmark plans. It's a little bit more complicated, I'll leave it at that, but basically the intent is people should not be paying more than 8.5% of their household income to the benchmark plan. So if you can pick other plans, but essentially the notion is that you should be able to afford your health care in the individual marketplace. So I just wanted to mention that, members, and thank the committee members of the conference committee to eliminate that portion. The other piece I also wanted to mention that I'm actually very excited to have passed, and I was actually the chief author a couple of years ago, was the Student Loan Borrowers Bill of Rights. And this is a very important bill for our students, for people who are still paying for their higher education. I still am. I'm still paying my law degree and my master's degree. So I feel the pain of the next generation, which is has saddled with debt, and we're doing less and less to support them. So this is a good bill that is a Student Loan Borrowers Bill of Rights, and this will allow people to have basically someone watching to make sure that students don't get overburdened with debt. It requires loan servicers to obtain a Minnesota license and enacts certain requirements, and I'm going to mention some of them because they weren't discussed earlier in the Senate. This would require timely responses to borrowers' written communication, requires servicers to apply overpayments as instructed by the borrower. It requires servicers to apply partial payments in a way that minimizes late fees and negative impacts on the borrower's credit history. It requires servicers to evaluate borrowers for income-driven repayment programs eligibility before placing them in forbearance or default. It prohibits servicers from engaging in unfair or deceptive practices and from attempting to mislead a borrower, from not knowingly misapplying payments, from providing inaccurate information to a consumer reporting agency, and finally, allowing the Commerce Commissioner to examine student loan servicers as necessary and take action against a licensee, including barring a person from service loans. So members, I think that's a very important portion of this bill that I want to make sure you highlight, and you can tell your constituents that we are doing more than just a higher education bill. We're doing more to help our students across our state to have their back, to help them with this crisis of debt. And I want to thank members who worked on that provision in particular. Thank you, and I will be a green vote on this bill.
Senator Dahms.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. I just wanted to, the comments in reference to reinsurance, I just want to make sure that the public understands and clarify. Number one, there is not language in this bill that eliminates reinsurance. That's not correct. However, there's not dollars in the bill to extend it. But I think if we're going to talk about putting the public on notice, we really should put the public on notice. And what hasn't been brought up is reinsurance covered all the people in the individual market. The subsidies coming from the federal are only going to cover people that were in the individual market that buy their insurance through MNsure. So if you personally are on buying an individual market, you're enjoying the benefits of a 25 to 30% reduction in insurance premiums, and you're buying through MNsure, you're fine. But if you're not buying through MNsure, you're not going to be eligible for subsidies when reinsurance goes away. So people need to fully understand that. We have several thousand people that are going to be standing naked when it comes to insurance because of the fact that we have taken away reinsurance and we have not backfilled the dollars. So I just wanted that to be pointed out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Marty. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to comment on the catalytic converter provisions except Senator Dietzich raised the issue. And there are some, I think these programs in here, it's more like a drop in the bucket, but it's a good step. I don't think the provisions requiring the extra reporting by scrap dealers is going to change anything. If somebody comes in with stolen converters, which happens every day, and they say, oh yeah, Joe Smith or my uncle or my best friend took this off the car, them reporting this in something that they keep in their own records there. Law enforcement, nobody has any way to do it. There's something like 130 of the scrap metal dealers. Nobody has the time to go around and search all of them out. So I don't think that's going to do anything. That's part of the problem. The other part of it, the pilot program, is a decent program. It's fairly expensive, $400,000, but it will get about 1% of our cars would have these little stickers on the converters, which make them less desirable for a thief because somebody could track it down. I do say that I'm still hopeful that the public safety conferees will consider a different approach, which is the approach that the auto theft investigators have been suggesting. It's 6 different provisions, and our bill would meet all of those. The chiefs, police have endorsed it, insurance federations endorsed it, Auto Recyclers Association have endorsed it. It would make a real significant difference. I think that approach we ought to be doing. It doesn't cost the taxpayers anything, and it would immediately change the status of it so that even if your converter is not marked, we'd have a decent chance of catching somebody for doing the wrong. So I really hope that I haven't given up hope that we're going to find a way to pass that in the public safety bill. This provision is not, it's not going to fix it. It might, for at least 1% of the public, it might make a little difference, but I think we should do one for 100% of the public. That's why I'm continuing to push the catalytic converter provision, and I don't think we should see this as a substitute for that. Again, it's a very expensive thing, and this is hitting all over. A couple weeks ago, heard from Rochester, 20 school buses hit for catalytic converters. That's got to be $50,000 for the school buses. Senator Uyghur just a minute ago was saying that he's heard from one of his local high schools, 8 kids have had converters stolen. Typical bill for people is $2,000 to $3,000 for these. And it's happening all over, every corner of the state, and I haven't figured out who's opposed to it. Everybody says, well, we can't do this, we can't do that. But it's time we do something about it. And this bill, again, I'm supporting the bill. And I think that the provision in here won't hurt. It's, for what you get out of it, it's fairly expensive, but it's better than just ignoring the problem totally. So I'm glad this is in here, but I really hope we can address the issue in a more fundamental way yet this year. Can always do it next year, but there are going to be a lot of thousands of your constituents who are going to have their converters ripped off, and people are really angry at what happens, and there is something we could do about it, and I'll happily talk to any members of the public safety conferees or any of you about it, because it's something we could address. We should still do it this year. But again, this isn't a bad thing. It's just not going to do much.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to, take a minute to say thank you to Senator Senjum, the agency, the working groups, Representatives Long and Stevenson who worked on this bill. I think there are some really good provisions in here. I appreciate, of course, adding in my bill about the cold weather rule and extending that time period. It's a good provision, and I'm pleased to see that it was added. I just want to take 1 minute to draw attention to one of the other changes regarding the disconnection portion of the bill that I think is a really positive change and will help us learn a lot more about this process. We have always set aside money to help low-income families in Minnesota pay their utility bills, and those families have not always been able to connect with that money. It's run through different agencies, different nonprofits, different utilities groups in different parts of the state, and families don't always know how to access it. So in this bill that we will eventually get to passing today, there's a provision that in addition to notice being sent to families or consumers when they are behind and are facing disconnection, that notice now also has to be sent to whichever local entity provides that low-income assistance. So this will give us a real opportunity to learn across our state where folks are facing these concerns. It will allow them to access the money that we as a legislature have set aside for them that has not always been used before. And it also must be sent to the department so the department can track it. And we'll be able to learn what is standing in the way of Minnesotans being able to pay their utility bills and how we can help support those families. I think it's a really strong provision. It'll be an important piece that really can help our communities all across the state, especially during these coldest months in Minnesota. I look forward to our continuing work to really address climate change and energy use in our state, but I'm glad that some of the work that we've done this time really makes sure that Minnesotans who are most affected by it have the protection that they need and that they will be able to access the resources that we've set aside for them. So I appreciate the work that was done on this bill and look forward to voting for it.
The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File 19, a bill for an act relating to commerce, establishing a biennial budget.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I just want to take a moment to thank Senator Dahms for including the Student Loan Bill of Rights provisions that I had the honor to introduce a few months ago, which do protect those who accept student loans. I think preventing predatory practices, especially those aimed at young students, is certainly a worthy cause. I've got 3 younger brothers and countless constituents who see the value in this legislation, and it will be appreciated by Minnesotans for years to come. Senator Franzen, thankfully, already went over some of the provisions I plan to share in regards to the bill. The long and short of it is that it provides protection, accountability, and transparency in a process that greatly needs it. These provisions solve a real problem that Minnesotans deal with daily. It'll do a lot of good for a lot of folks, and again, wanted to thank Senator Dahms for including it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Friends, for your comments on the energy portion of the bill. I just wanted to make a couple of comments relative to the Minnesota utilities, and the fact that I would say, Mr. President, members, as you think about utilities in Minnesota and what they have done with respect to preparing for a clean energy future, Xcel Energy, 100% by 2050, Minnesota Power, 100% by 2050, Great River Energy closing down their North Dakota power plant, coal-fired power plant, advancing to, again, a clean energy future for them. Otter Tail is on the way, but you can go on and on, whether it's the industrial, the investor-owned or the co-ops or even the municipal utilities are making really good progress in my opinion towards a clean energy future. So that can't be unsaid, I don't think, as we consider this bill today, as we think about, again, the future relative to energy. Our utilities, I think, are leading the way for our entire nation, frankly, and certainly perhaps even the world with respect to their initiatives relative to, again, ensuring that the electricity they provide going on into the future is going to be clean energy for all of us. So thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to make those comments.
Final discussion on the bill. Senator Dahms.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members. And just in closing, I would just like to thank the senators today for the conversation and sharing their thoughts and certainly their concerns. And I think that it's a pretty good bill, and I'd appreciate support as we move this bill. With that said, in closing comments, I'd just like to thank Wendy Havaso, our committee CLA, Owen Newberger, our committee administrator, John Cotter, our researcher, Casey Mum, our fiscal analyst, and Chris Stang, our counsel. Certainly do appreciate all the work they've done and appreciate the work that the conference committee was able to do on this bill. So with that said, Mr. President, if there are no other comments, I'd move to lay the bill on the table.
Senator Dahms moves to lay Senate File 19 on the table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Members, before we recess, we're going to go to some announcements, and then there's going to be a recess for the Finance Committee, and Senator Johnson will give a little explanation of what to expect the rest of the day and tomorrow. But before we do that, we'll go to announcements of Senate interest. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, and to our staff and everyone who's listening. You may have heard the sad news that occurred just a few days ago. One of our beloved and longtime Senate staffers, David Gross, legislative assistant to Senator Eaton, left us. He was only 46 years old, 46 years young. And he worked with Senator Eaton from the very beginning when she came to us in a special election in 2011, replacing our, of course, beloved Senator Scheid. And they were also, which you may not know, were very, very good friends. Senator Eaton and David Gross were very good friends from long before he came to work for her here. I remember him as a very kind and very decent man, a very hard worker, and Senator Eaton and I were chuckling before, an uncommon level of energy, perpetual state of motion even when he was just sitting in a chair. And I know that he was a very close collaborator and confidant of Senator Eaton's. We were talking yesterday, and like so many of us, we just think, we just reach for that phone or that text with our assistants to tell them something or ask them to do something, and she still has that impulse, and that's how close we become with our staff. Of course, he was a part of our Senate DFL caucus family. We are all very, very close, and I know that our staff is extremely close, and this came upon us, happened very, very suddenly, so we're all kind of in a state of shock. Even though David had tremendous health struggles over the years, it did not diminish in one iota his level of productivity or his energy or his contributions to our caucus, to the Senate, to Senator Eaton's work, of course, and to the people of Senate District 40. He was the baby of the family. He had a number of siblings. His mom and his dad are still with us as well. His mom herself is just coming out of the hospital and struggling with health problems herself. So we extend our deepest sorrow and condolences and our love to David's family as well. I wanted to share, Senator Herr shared some thoughts and some beautiful pictures of them on a trip up to the Boundary Waters with Senator Herr, and he said, I met David on my first day checking into my office at the Capitol in G4. He gave me the added strength to make important decisions. We became good friends, and I always tell all of my staff to learn from him. He became one of my crew to the Boundary Waters canoe area on a couple of trips. I will miss him greatly. I think some others wanted to share some memories of David as well.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too am honored to pay tribute to David Gross, David, even before Senator Eaton, he had served here for former Senator John Dowell as a staff person for 4 years. And I think Senator Dowell said that, yeah, you couldn't find a more loyal person who cared more about others. And David, as those who knew him knew, was a person of very few words. He was quiet, he was introspective, but he really cared about you. I think people would say he'd give you his shirt off his back if you needed it. He'd do anything for you. Intensely loyal. I think Senator Dahl actually said, you know, I think when you'd have angry constituents on something, he'd be one there to want to take the brunt of the attacks because he cared more about others than about himself. And I just want to say briefly that despite his quiet demeanor, he was always around. I mean, you could see him late at night often working at the Capitol, always working hard, always caring for others. He was truly what you'd call a good, kind, decent, and caring person, a wonderful human being. And on Monday night, when we were saying goodbye, his office, he and Senator Eaton right next door, and as they were saying goodbye, and I said goodbye, of course, none of us knew it was the last time we'd say goodbye. But David was a gem of a human being, the best you can be. And I just want to say goodbye, David. We'll miss you. Rest in peace. And I'd ask if we could have just a brief moment of silence.
Senator Marty, we'll go to Senator Kent first, and then we'll do the moment of silence. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like so many, this has been a shocking loss and a sad time in our caucus family and in the Minnesota Senate. When I heard from Senator Eaton, and I knew how profound this loss is for her, I remembered when I was a brand new candidate in 2012, and Senator Eaton, who, even though she'd only come into the Senate a year before, it seemed like she'd been here forever and was so well established. And she came door knocking with me in my community, and we got to know each other. And she was so positive, and to as I said, a new candidate, you know, in a tough race. And she was so sure that I was going to get elected. And she was giving me all these tips. And she kept talking about David and how much he meant for her and how much he did for her and in giving that counsel. And that relationship was one of the first things I really knew about the Minnesota Senate. And so that is why this loss is extra hard. When I think about David, he really, to me, does represent so much of what makes the Minnesota Senate special and amazing. It is these relationships that we all build with each other. It is the dedication to the work that we do that he embodied so strongly. It is that excellence, that commitment to the excellence, because what we do matters. And it is the deep care for the work that we do for Minnesotans. And David brought that with him quietly, as Senator Marty said, and under the radar often, but it was always there, always there. I just also want to share my deepest sympathies to Senator Eaton on her personal loss. And also to his family and many friends, and my thanks to everyone who has expressed their condolences to all of us who are experiencing this loss. Thank you.
Members, please rise for a moment of silence. Thank you, members. We're still under motions and resolutions, but are there any other announcements before we go to recess? Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, I want to offer my sincere condolences and sympathies to Senator Eaton. And thank you, Senator Dibble, Senator Marty, and Senator Leader Kent for your kind words. Just really quickly, I wanted to announce that I really greatly appreciate all the hard work everyone has put in, all of my colleagues this year. A lot of great work has been done. And as we're nearing the finish line, Senator McEwen and I decided to bring some beef samosas for everybody. So it's in the retiring room, so please, once we're over, come out to the back and grab one. Thank you.
Further announcements, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Westrom, I guess. Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I was remiss in going over the agriculture bill just to call out thank you to our staff, and particularly one staff that is retiring, but Hannah Grunwald is Senate Counsel, our fiscal staff, Joel Hansen's our committee administrator, Ben Abramson, our new CLA, Andrew Larson on our side, Jackie Clinton on the DFL research side. But Greg Knopf, everybody knows, has been a cornerstone around the Senate for 38 years. All the years I've served here, and even years in the House, worked with him on agriculture and environment issues. And I can tell you, as the chair of the committee, you depend a lot on Senate Counsel and their history, their memories, their recollections of how things were done in the past. It's always helpful as you're trying to find ways to come up with new ideas, work in old ideas so they can fit into new ideas. And Mr. Knopf was just remarkable and so nice to work with, so easy to work with, and so great to work with for myself and our committee. And I dare say every senator would have similar feelings. Some had less of an opportunity to work with him than others of us. And for those of us that have had the great chance to work with him, I just want to wish him well in his retirement, thank him for his service to the Senate, and acknowledge the contribution that he's made to the State Senate and to our Agriculture Committee over the years. It was a real blessing to work with him, and I wish him blessings on his retirement and great days and future ahead.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Several things. I, too, would like to express our caucus's remorse and regret of the passing of David Gross. He meant a lot to this entire body. I remember working with him and you intimately on many drug bills, Senator Eaton, and I know you were extremely close to him, and his unwavering allegiance to you was, you absolutely could feel it. He just adored you, and you treated him extremely well. He was your partner at this business very, very well, and we all value those partners in this business. Can't do it without him. And so we're all going to feel the loss of David Gross, and maybe rest in peace, and let's never forget what a wonderful man and what he contributed to this institution. With that, this is the downer for the Finance Committee. We're going to meet 15 minutes after the end of session in room 123. We have Senator Pratt's jobs bill up. Thank you very much.
Members, before we go to Senator Johnson to give some announcements and a recess, we're going to take care of a little bit more business here. Without objection, Senator Dietzich will be excused from today's session from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. We're going to quickly revert, remaining under motions and resolutions, we'll revert to the 8th order of business. We have an addendum with some more bill introductions. Senate file numbers 46 through 50 will be given their first reading and referred as indicated. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we will go back to Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, in a few moments, I'll ask for a recess. But before we do that, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing for the next, well, at least through tomorrow. So we're going to take a recess here to the call of a chair, do the finance hearing, and then we're going to be coming back, but we need just a limited number of members, just the skeleton crew, to do reports and bill introductions when we come back here. Tomorrow morning, we're going to get going a little bit earlier so you can enjoy at least some of your weekend. 9 a.m. start. We're going to do the jobs bill, assuming that gets voted out of finance later today. Do some of the House bills. Then we'll recess again for finance to the call of the chair, and then we will just need a limited number of members again that afternoon. So with that, please keep in mind all this is very fluid, and we're still figuring out how things are working with the House. So things are subject to change. So with that, Mr. President, I call for a recess to the call of the chair.
Senator Johnson moves that the Senate recess to the call of the President. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is in recess.